The control room of USS Tang fell silent except for the mechanical whir of gears and the soft clicking of brass components moving in synchronized precision. Lieutenant Commander Richard O'Kane pressed his eye to the periscope, watching the silhouette of a Japanese cargo vessel cut through the darkness 3,000 yards ahead. His executive officer stood beside the gleaming metal box mounted against the bulkhead, a contraption of dials, cranks, and electrical connections that resembled a cross between a cash register and a church organ. This was the Torpedo Data Computer, and in the cramped confines of the Pacific War, it represented something no other navy possessed: the ability to track an enemy ship through time itself. "Target bearing steady," O'Kane murmured, his hands adjusting the periscope with practiced ease. "Range decreasing. She's making turns for maybe 12 knots. The TDC operator's hands moved across the controls, feeding information into the machine's mechanical brain. Inside the polished brass housing, hundreds of gears, differentials, and resolvers churned through calculations that would have taken a skilled mathematician several minutes with pencil and paper. The machine did it continuously, automatically, updating the firing solution every fraction of a second as the Tang maneuvered into position. The target's predicted course glowed on a plotting table nearby, a line extending into the future based on observations taken over the past 15 minutes. If you're enjoying this deep dive into the story, hit the subscribe button and let us know in the comments from where in the world you are watching from today. In the wardroom of Imperial Japanese Navy submarine I-27, 3 months earlier, Lieutenant Commander Fukumura Toshiaki had sat with his officers reviewing fire control procedures using their Type 97 torpedo calculator. It was, by any measure, a sophisticated device far superior to the handheld slide rules that American submariners had used in the first years of the war. The calculator could solve for gyro angles with impressive speed, taking inputs for target bearing, speed, and range to compute the angle at which a torpedo should be fired to intercept a moving ship. But it solved for one moment in time, one snapshot, one frozen calculation based on the assumption that nothing would change between the moment of computation and the moment of firing. In the chaotic dance of submarine warfare, where targets zigzagged unpredictably and submarines maneuvered constantly to maintain firing position, that assumption was a dangerous fiction. The Japanese system, like its German counterpart, required the submarine to maneuver to a pre-calculated firing position and hope desperately that the target hadn't altered course in the intervening seconds. The difference between the American Torpedo Data Computer and every other fire control system in the world's submarine fleets came down to 3 words: continuous target tracking. While other systems provided answers, the TDC provided ongoing conversation with reality. It didn't just calculate where a target would be. It updated that calculation constantly, accounting for the submarine's own movements, changes in target bearing rate, and the complex trigonometry of interception geometry. Feed it new observations, and it refined its prediction. The submarine could maneuver freely, and the TDC would adjust. The target could alter course, and the TDC would detect the change through bearing rate analysis. It was, in the truest sense, the first operational fire control computer that thought in real time. The path to this technological watershed had begun more than a decade before Pearl Harbor. In 1932, the Bureau of Ordnance initiated development of what would become the TDC in collaboration with Armour Corporation and Ford Instruments. The problem they sought to solve had plagued torpedo warfare since Robert Whitehead developed the modern torpedo in the 1860s. How to aim a weapon that travelled through water for nearly a minute, while its target moved several hundred yards in unpredictable directions. During the First World War, American submarine commanders had relied on instruments that submariners referred to with a mixture of dark humour and frustration. The Mark 8 angle solver earned the nickname banjo for its distinctive curved shape. Another device, the ISWA's circular slide rule, attempted to predict future target position based on where a ship was and where it had been moments before. As one submarine officer would later write, these tools were called ISWAs because all too often, by the time you got an answer to where the target is, it wasn't there anymore. The limitations were brutally exposed in practice. A submarine commander needed to estimate target range, speed, and course, three variables that were extraordinarily difficult to determine accurately through a periscope. Range. Estimation relied on stadimeters that measured the angle between a ship's waterline and masthead, requiring the commander to know or guess the height of the enemy vessel's mast. Speed estimation came from observing how quickly a ship moved across the periscope's field of view, a technique that demanded exceptional judgment and experience. Course estimation was perhaps the most challenging of all, requiring the commander to determine angle on the bow, the angle formed by the target's heading, and the line of sight from submarine to target. Get any of these estimates significantly wrong, and torpedoes would pass harmlessly ahead or astern of their intended victims. A submarine carried limited torpedoes, typically 24 weapons for a patrol lasting weeks or months. Each miss represented not just a failed attack, but the expenditure of a resource that cost roughly $160,000 in today's currency, and could not be replaced until the boat returned to port. Pressure on submarine commanders to achieve hits with minimal torpedo expenditure was immense. The early war patrols demonstrated these challenges with painful clarity. On December 24, 1941, less than 3 weeks after Pearl Harbor, the submarine Sargo fired 12 torpedoes at 4 different targets. The last 4 torpedoes were fired with what the commander described as textbook perfect setup conditions. None hit. In January of 1942, Sea Dragon fired 8 torpedoes on her first war patrol and achieved only a single hit. Commander after commander reported similar experiences: perfect firing positions, careful calculations, and torpedoes that somehow missed their marks. Some of these failures resulted from defects in the Mark 14 torpedo itself, problems with depth control, magnetic exploders, and contact detonators that would take nearly 2 years to fully resolve. But even when torpedoes ran true, the fundamental challenge of fire control remained. Predicting where a moving target would be 60 to 90 seconds in the future, while your own submarine maneuvered to maintain position or avoid detection. The Torpedo Data Computer offered a solution that seemed almost magical to submariners who had struggled with manual calculation methods. The system consisted of 2 integrated sections working in harmony. The position keeper continuously tracked target motion, building up an increasingly accurate picture of enemy course and speed through multiple observations over time. The angle solver took this tracking data and computed the gyro angles required for torpedoes to intercept the target, updating these angles continuously and transmitting them directly to the torpedo tubes. This integration meant that a submarine commander could work the fire control problem methodically, taking his time to develop an accurate picture of target motion. Instead of rushing to get a single snapshot calculation before firing, he could observe the target over 15 or 20 minutes, feeding bearing observations into the TDC at intervals. The machine would correlate these observations, calculate target course and speed, and predict future position. If the predicted bearings matched actual bearings when checked against new observations, the commander knew his firing solution was accurate. If they diverged, he could adjust his estimates and let the TDC recalculate. More importantly, the TDC divorced the submarine's course from the torpedo's course. Without the TDC, a submarine essentially needed to point itself at the predicted intercept point, then fire torpedoes straight ahead. This required precise submarine course control and meant the entire vessel needed to be properly positioned, a time-consuming process that limited tactical flexibility. With the TDC, torpedoes could be fired on any gyro angle the commander chose. The submarine could maintain an advantageous position for observation and escape, while the TDC calculated the offset angle needed to send torpedoes to intercept the target. The tactical implications were profound. A commander could position his submarine off the beam of a convoy, maintaining visual contact and a good firing position, while the TDC computed angles that would send torpedoes ahead or astern to strike different vessels. He could continue maneuvering to avoid escorts, while the TDC automatically adjusted firing angles to compensate for his own ship's movements. If smoke or fog temporarily obscured the target, the TDC's position keeper would continue tracking, allowing accurate fire even without visual contact. Lieutenant Commander Fukumura, had he survived to be captured and interrogated about Japanese submarine fire control methods, would have explained a fundamentally different approach. The Japanese Type 97 calculator was a precision instrument, superbly engineered and capable of rapid computation. But it required the submarine to achieve a specific geometric, the relationship with the target, typically a perpendicular position off the beam, and hold that position long enough to complete the firing sequence. Any last-minute maneuvering by the submarine or course change by the target could invalidate the solution. The calculator provided an answer for a fixed moment in time, not a continuously updated prediction. German submarines employed similar methods, using the Vorhaltreckner torpedo calculator to solve the interception problem. Like the Japanese system, it was fundamentally a snapshot calculator rather than a tracking computer. U-boat commanders became highly skilled at rapid mental calculations and developed aggressive tactics that often involved penetrating directly into convoy formations to fire at point-blank range, where precise calculations mattered less than raw courage and quick shooting. But for longer-range attacks requiring careful stalking and position development, the lack of continuous tracking capability imposed significant limitations. The first submarine designed specifically to mount the TDC was USS Tambor, launched in 1940. She carried the Mark III version of the computer, installed in her conning tower where it could be positioned near periscopes, radar, sonar, and other fire control equipment. The physical installation was no simple matter. The TDC Mark III was a substantial piece of machinery, roughly the size of a large filing cabinet, constructed primarily of brass and steel components. It weighed several hundred pounds and required mounting on shock-absorbing foundations to protect its delicate mechanical computing elements from depth charge attacks and the routine hammering of sea operations. The conning tower of a World War II fleet submarine was already one of the most cramped spaces imaginable, a pressure cylinder perhaps 8 feet in diameter, where the captain, executive officer, quartermaster, radar operator, sonar operator, TDC operator, and sometimes others, worked during attacks. Adding the TDC meant accepting even more crowding in exchange for dramatically improved fire control capability. The Navy judged it a worthy trade. Operating the TDC required specialized training. Each submarine carried a TDC operator, a sailor, who understood the machine's mechanical principles and could maintain its hundreds of gears, differentials, and electrical connections in working order, despite the corrosive salt air and constant vibration of submarine operations. The operator sat at the TDC during approaches, his hands on the cranks and dials that fed information into the computing mechanism. He worked closely with the approach officer, typically the executive officer, who coordinated the flow of information from periscope observations, radar ranging, and sonar bearings into the TDC's inputs. The submarine's gyro compass fed ownship, heading directly into the TDC through electrical connections. A pitometer log, a device that measured water speed passed. The hull provided ownship speed. These automatic inputs meant the TDC always knew where the submarine was heading and how fast it was moving. Target information came from human observations, the captain calling out bearings from the periscope, radar operators providing range measurements, sonar operators confirming contact bearings. This hybrid of automatic and manual inputs created a fire control system that combined the precision of mechanical computation with the judgment and experience of skilled observers. The TDC's output went directly to the torpedo rooms through electrical connections called synchros. In both the forward and after torpedo rooms, gyro setting mechanisms connected to each torpedo tube received continuous updates from the TDC. As the fire control solution developed and the TDC calculated new gyro angles, these angles were automatically set into the torpedoes, still loaded in their tubes. A torpedo man watching the gyro setting indicator could see the angle, changing in real time as the submarine and target maneuvered. When the captain gave the order to fire, the torpedo already had the correct course, set, no last-minute manual adjustments needed. This automation extended to all 10 torpedo tubes simultaneously. The TDC Mark III could control the entire submarine's torpedo battery, updating angles for bow and stern tubes, tracking target motion, while the submarine turned to bring different tubes to bear, maintaining firing solutions through evasive maneuvers and convoy zigzags. It transformed submarine attack from a carefully choreographed ballet requiring precise positioning into a more fluid engagement, where the submarine could maneuver freely while maintaining firing readiness. The human element remained critical. The TDC was only as good as the information fed into it, and submarine commanders varied enormously in their ability to estimate target course, speed, and range. Some, like Richard O'Kane, practiced obsessively. O'Kane spent hours looking at scale models of Japanese warships and merchantmen mounted on a calibrated turntable, viewed through an inverted pair of binoculars to simulate the periscope's compressed perspective. He trained himself to call angle on bow estimates within a few degrees just from the visual aspect of a ship's profile. This skill, combined with the TDC's computational power, made him devastatingly effective. Others never fully mastered the judgment required for accurate inputs. The TDC could detect errors if predicted bearings diverged significantly from observed bearings. Something was wrong with the estimates. But the machine couldn't correct fundamentally bad input data. A commander who consistently misjudged target speed would get consistent torpedo misses, no matter how precisely the TDC performed its calculations. The machine amplified skill, but couldn't create it where none existed. By mid-1943, with torpedo defects largely resolved and TDC-equipped submarines becoming the standard throughout the Pacific Fleet, American submarine commanders began to demonstrate what this technology could achieve in skilled hands. On July 24, 1943, USS Tainosa under Commander Daspit stalked the Japanese whale factory ship Tonan Maru No. 3 in waters south of Truk. Daspit fired an initial spread of 4 torpedoes, achieving 2 hits that stopped the 19,000-ton vessel dead in the water. With no escorts in sight, he had time for careful positioning. He maneuvered Tang into a textbook firing position 875 yards off the target's beam and methodically fired 9 additional torpedoes while observing through his periscope. All 9 struck the target's hull with audible clangs. All 9 failed to detonate due to defective contact exploders. But the incident demonstrated the TDC's precision. 11 torpedoes fired at a stationary target from varying positions. 11 solid hits. The fire control, the solution worked perfectly. The best American submarine commanders, those who combined accurate observation skills with tactical aggression and effective use of the TDC, achieved hit rates that would have been impossible with earlier fire control methods. Commander Dudley Mush Morton of USS Wahoo, with O'Kane serving as his executive officer and approach officer, sank ship after ship by using the TDC to develop accurate firing solutions even while maneuvering aggressively. When O'Kane took command of Tang, his first 5 patrols sank 33 confirmed Japanese vessels, totaling over 116,000 tons, the highest total for any American submarine commander. The TDC was his primary weapon of calculation. These successes came at a price in complexity. The TDC required constant maintenance. Salt air corroded electrical connections. Depth charge attacks could jar gears out of alignment. The mechanical integrators that generated target position predictions used friction drive components that needed periodic calibration. A dedicated technician worked full-time maintaining the machine, replacing worn parts, cleaning electrical contacts, and verifying computational accuracy through test problems. When the TDC malfunctioned during a patrol, the submarine's effectiveness plummeted, forcing commanders to revert to manual calculation methods that felt primitive by comparison. The TDC's real advantage emerged most clearly in complex, multi-ship engagements against WWII. Against a single target making steady course and speed, even manual methods could produce acceptable results with enough time and skill. But when attacking a convoy of 6, 8, or 10 ships all on slightly different courses, with escorts zigzagging between them and the submarine maneuvering to maintain position while avoiding counterattack, the computational burden overwhelmed manual methods. The TDC could track through this chaos, updating solutions continuously as the tactical picture evolved. A commander could fire at one ship, swing to a new target, and have a fresh firing solution ready within seconds rather than minutes. This capability fundamentally changed American submarine tactics in the Pacific. Instead of approaching cautiously, firing a spread at extreme range, then diving deep to evade escorts, American submarines under aggressive commanders would penetrate directly into convoy formations, often attacking on the surface at night when their low silhouette and superior speed gave tactical advantage. They would fire at multiple targets in rapid succession, using the TDC to track several ships simultaneously and generate firing solutions as opportunities presented themselves. Some commanders fired spreads at ships ahead and astern in the same attack, relying on the TDC to compute the dramatically different gyro angles required for each target. These tactics horrified more conservative officers trained in pre-war doctrine that emphasized stealth and caution. But they worked. Between December of 1941 and August of 1945, American submarines sank approximately 1,300 Japanese merchant vessels and warships, totaling over 5 million tons. The commercial shipping losses strangled Japan's war economy, cutting off oil from the Dutch East Indies, raw materials from Southeast Asia, and food from occupied territories. By war's end, Japan's merchant fleet had been reduced to a fraction of its pre-war size, unable to sustain military operations or feed the home islands. American submarines, equipped with the TDC and manned by increasingly skilled commanders, had executed one of history's most successful commerce raiding campaigns. The Japanese never developed an equivalent system. Their submarine force, though equipped with excellent torpedoes, the Type 95 with its oxygen-fueled engine had range and speed characteristics superior to American weapons, lacked the fire control technology to fully exploit these advantages. Japanese submarine doctrine emphasized attacks against enemy warships rather than merchant shipping, a strategic choice that reduced their impact on American logistics. But even when Japanese submarines achieved favorable attack positions against warships, their fire control methods limited effectiveness. The inability to track targets continuously meant that last-second course changes by alert destroyer captains could spoil carefully developed firing solutions. German U-boats faced similar limitations in the Atlantic. Their Vorhaltreckner calculator was sophisticated, and German submariners developed great skill in rapid attack methods that minimized the time between calculation and firing. But the lack of continuous tracking meant that approaches needed to be faster, ranges shorter, and firing opportunities seized quickly before the tactical geometry changed. American submarine doctrine, enabled by the TDC, could be more methodical stalking targets, for 20 minutes or more, to develop highly accurate firing solutions before committing torpedoes. The post-war analysis of submarine effectiveness across all combatant nations revealed stark differences. American submarines in the Pacific achieved overall hit rates around 36%, meaning roughly 1 torpedo in 3 found its target. This figure included the troubled early war period, when torpedo defects caused many failures, the learning curve as new commanders gained experience, and the dilution of expertise as the submarine force expanded rapidly to meet wartime demands. The best commanders, those who mastered both the TDC and the observational skills it required, achieved hit rates approaching 50% or higher. German and British submarines showed similar patterns, with effectiveness depending heavily on individual commander skill and experience. Japanese submarines, operating under different tactical doctrine and without equivalent fire control technology, achieved lower overall hit rates despite having superior torpedoes. These dry statistics represented human lives and national treasure expended in desperate combat beneath the waves. Each torpedo that missed meant another attack run would be needed, more time in dangerous waters, more exposure to counterattack. Each hit could send a freighter laden with aviation fuel to the bottom, could cripple a cruiser, could cut the supply line that kept an island garrison fed and armed. The TDC wasn't magic, it couldn't guarantee hits, couldn't compensate for bad judgment or equipment failures, couldn't make an inexperienced commander into an expert, but in the hands of a skilled operator, it provided a degree of fire control precision that simply wasn't available to other navies. The night air above the Formosa Strait carried the smell of diesel exhaust and salt spray as Tang raced across the surface at 17 knots, her 4 main engines thundering in the darkness. O'Kane stood on the bridge, binoculars scanning the horizon where radar had detected a convoy making its way north toward Japan. Below in the conning tower, the TDC operator waited at his station, the machine's brass components gleaming under red battle lights that preserved night vision. This was the TDC's element, not the carefully controlled test conditions of peacetime exercises, but the chaos of actual combat, where seconds mattered and mistakes meant death. Radar contact bearing 340, range 12,000 yards. The radar operator called up through the hatch. Multiple targets. Looks like 6 or 7 ships. O'Kane acknowledged with a nod, his mind already processing the tactical problem. A convoy meant escorts, destroyers or patrol craft that would hunt Tang if she revealed her position. It meant zigzagging merchantmen whose courses changed every few minutes according to pre-arranged patterns. It meant multiple firing opportunities if he positioned Tang correctly, but also multiple ways to die if he miscalculated. The TDC would help him navigate this deadly geometry, but only if he fed it accurate information and made sound tactical decisions about which targets to engage and in what sequence. If you find this story engaging, please take a moment to subscribe and enable notifications. It helps us continue producing in-depth content like this. Tang closed the range on the surface, using her speed advantage to reach a position ahead of the convoy where she could turn and attack down the line of ships. At 5,000 yards, O'Kane could make out silhouettes through his binoculars, several large cargo vessels escorted by what appeared to be 2 destroyers. He began the approach, calling observations down to the conning tower, where the approach officer logged each bearing and fed estimates into the TDC. Bearing to lead ship 355. He's making turns for about 10 knots. Angle on the bow. Port 4 to 5. In the conning tower, hands moved across the yaw. TDC's controls. The target bearing went in through a dial. The estimated speed 10 knots was set on another control. The angle on the bow, that critical estimate of the target's heading relative to the line of sight, required judgment honed through hundreds of hours of practice. Get it wrong by 20 degrees, and torpedoes would pass harmlessly ahead or astern of their target 60 seconds later when they reached the intercept point. The TDC's position keeper began its work, integrating this information with Tang's own course and speed to build a prediction of where the target would be over time. As minutes passed and new bearing observations came in, the machine refined its track. If the predicted bearings matched the observed bearings, the solution was converging, the estimates of target course and speed were accurate. If they diverged, something was wrong and estimates needed adjustment. Bearings checking. The approach officer called up to O'Kane. Solution looks good. This confirmation meant the TDC's predictions were matching reality. The target was where the machine calculated it should be, moving as expected. The gyro angles being set into the torpedoes in the forward room would send them to the correct intercept point. Now it was a matter of choosing the moment to fire when range was optimal, when the target's position in the convoy offered the best chance for multiple hits, when Tang could fire and clear the area before escorts responded. O'Kane watched the range close through 1,000 yards. The lead cargo ship, a large vessel of perhaps 7,000 tons, presented her full beam to Tang's position. Behind her, 2 more merchantmen steamed in column, and beyond them the darker shapes of escorts. The tactical problem was clear. Fire at the lead ship, then swing Tang to bring stern tubes to bear on the second ship before the convoy realized it was under attack. Stand by forward tubes 1 through 4, O'Kane ordered. Generated. Bearing is. The TDC operator read off the bearing the machine had calculated the exact direction Tang's bow needed to point for the torpedoes to run true to intercept. O'Kane swung Tang onto that heading, feeling the deck tilt slightly as the rudder bit and the submarine turned. The gyro angles were already set in the torpedoes, ranging from 5 degrees to 15 degrees, as the spread was designed to cover the target's length even if estimates were slightly off. Fire 1. Fire 2. Fire 3. Fire 4. 4 Mark 14 torpedoes leaped from their tubes, compressed air driving them out into the dark water. Their steam engines ignited seconds later, leaving phosphorescent wakes that streaked toward the target at 46 knots. O'Kane counted seconds in his head, watching through binoculars as the torpedoes ran true. 58 seconds after firing, a flash erupted amidships on the cargo vessel. 7 seconds later, a second hit struck near the stern. The ship's silhouette changed shape as her back broke, and she began settling rapidly. But there was no time to observe the results. O'Kane swung Tang hard to port, bringing the stern tubes to bear on the second ship in line. The TDC had been tracking this target simultaneously with the first, updating its position and maintaining a firing solution even while Tang attacked the lead vessel. This was the system's power, the ability to work multiple problems at once, to maintain awareness of the entire tactical situation rather than focusing on a single target. Stern tubes ready, solution updated, the approach officer called. The TDC had compensated for Tang's violent turn, recalculating gyro angles for the new geometry. 12 seconds later, 3 torpedoes left the stern tubes. 2 minutes after that, the second merchantman was dead in the water, her engine room flooded and her crew abandoning ship. Now the escorts responded. Searchlights stabbed across the water as the destroyers turned toward Tang's last known position, their sonar pinging as they searched for the submarine that had just cut 2 ships from their convoy. O'Kane ordered Tang deep, crash diving as the first destroyer closed the range. In the control room, men worked with practiced urgency, flooding ballast tanks and angling the bow planes down as the submarine nosed beneath the surface. The TDC operator secured his machine, locking the mechanical components against the violent maneuvering that would follow. For the next 2 hours, Tang evaded depth charge attacks, twisting through temperature layers and using her superior depth capability to stay below the destroyer's sonar search cone. When she finally surfaced that night, 30 miles from the attack position, O'Kane gathered his officers to review the patrol report. 2 confirmed sinks totaling approximately 14,000 tons. 7 torpedoes expended, 4 from the bow, 3 from the stern. Hit rate, 4 torpedoes out of 7, roughly 57%. The TDC had performed flawlessly, tracking multiple targets simultaneously and providing accurate firing solutions even while Tang maneuvered at high speed. This pattern repeated across hundreds of American submarine patrols during the war's middle and late periods. Commanders learned to trust the TDC's calculations, to rely on the machine's ability to track through complexity that would overwhelm manual methods. The learning curve was steep. New commanders needed several patrols to develop the observational skills and tactical judgment the system required. But once mastered, the TDC enabled attack methods that simply weren't feasible with snapshot calculators. Consider the alternative approach forced upon submarine commanders without continuous tracking systems. A German U-boat commander, stalking a convoy in the Atlantic, needed to maneuver his boat into a pre-calculated firing position, solve the fire control problem, using his Vorhaltrechnung calculator, and fire before the turb. Tactical geometry changed. If an escort detected the U-boat and forced it to maneuver, the firing solution was lost and needed to be recalculated from scratch. If the target zigzagged while the U-boat approached, the commander had to decide whether to abort the approach or attempt a quick recalculation with uncertain results. The most successful German commanders developed tactics that minimized this vulnerability. They penetrated directly into convoy formations on the surface at night, closing to point-blank range where precise calculations mattered less than quick shooting and nerve. Otto Kretschmer, one of the Kriegsmarine's top aces, famously advocated surfaced night attacks at ranges under 600 yards, where the target filled the periscope view and torpedo runtime was measured in seconds rather than minutes. At such ranges, even a basic angle solver provided adequate fire control. The challenge was reaching that position without being detected and killed by escorts. American submarine doctrine, particularly as it evolved in the Pacific during 1943 and 44, took a different path. The TDC enabled methodical approaches at longer ranges, where the submarine could develop accurate firing solutions over time. A commander could begin tracking a target at 5,000 or 6,000 yards, spending 15 minutes to build confidence in the fire control solution before committing to an attack. This patience often paid dividends. Accurate firing solutions at ranges of 2,000 to 3,000 yards produced higher hit rates than hasty shots at extreme range or dangerously close quarters. The doctrine emphasized what submariners called solving the approach problem, using the TDC to work backward from a desired firing position to determine what course and speed the submarine needed to reach that position at the optimal moment. The machine could predict when the submarine would reach a given position based on current course, speed, when the target would cross a particular bearing, when the range would close to the desired firing distance. This predictive capability transformed submarine tactics from reactive improvisation into calculated chess moves, where commanders thought several steps ahead. Lieutenant Richard O'Kane demonstrated this methodical approach during his service as executive officer aboard USS Wahoo under Commander Dudley Morton. Morton had adopted an unusual command arrangement. Instead of the captain controlling the periscope during attacks, he turned that task over to O'Kane while he roamed the conning tower, orchestrating the overall tactical situation. O'Kane would call observations from the periscope target bearings, angle on the bow, visual range estimates. The TDC operator would input this data. The approach officer would monitor the solution's development, and Morton would make tactical decisions about which targets to engage, when to fire, when to break off and seek new opportunities. This division of labor exploited the TDC's capabilities fully. O'Kane could focus exclusively on accurate observations, honing his ability to estimate angle on the bow and call bearings precisely. The TDC operator concentrated on feeding this information into the machine and monitoring solution quality. Morton used the tactical picture generated by this process to make command decisions without being tied to the periscope. The result was a highly effective fire control team that sank ship after ship during Wahoo's aggressive patrols through 1943. When O'Kane took command of Tang in late 1943, he brought this systematic approach with him. His patrol reports reveal a commander who used the TDC not just as a calculating device but as a tactical planning tool. He would track convoys for hours before attacking, building detailed pictures of their composition, escorts positions, and likely zig patterns. He would identify the most valuable targets, tankers carrying aviation fuel, troop transports, ammunition ships, and plan attacks specifically against these vessels, rather than simply shooting at whatever presented itself. On Tang's third patrol, into the Yellow and East China Seas during June and July of 1944, O'Kane sank 10 confirmed Japanese ships, the most successful single patrol by any American submarine during the war. The TDC enabled this achievement through multiple complex attacks against well-defended convoys. In one engagement, Tang tracked a 7-ship convoy for 3 hours after initial radar contact, building firing solutions on each vessel while maneuvering to reach an optimal attack position. When O'Kane finally committed to the attack, he fired spreads at 3 different targets in rapid succession, using the TDC's multi-target tracking to maintain solutions on all 3 ships simultaneously. The machine's ability to divorce submarine course from torpedo course proved crucial in this attack. Tang was heading northwest at the moment. O'Kane fired at the first target heading northeast. The TDC computed a gyro angle of 70 degrees, meaning the torpedoes turned sharp right immediately after leaving their tubes to track toward the intercept point. Seconds later, with Tang still on the same heading, O'Kane fired at a second target on a completely different bearing. The TDC calculated a new gyro angle and set it into the next spread of torpedoes automatically. Manual fire control methods would have required Tang to turn toward each target before firing, consuming precious time and potentially allowing the convoy to scatter. This tactical flexibility came at the cost of complexity. The TDC required constant attention to detail, careful input of accurate data, and vigilance against the small errors that could cascade into major mistakes. One common error involved incorrect input of torpedo speed. The Mark 14 torpedo had 2 speed settings, 46 knots for maximum speed or 31 knots for extended range. The slower Mark 18 electric torpedo ran at only 27 knots. If the TDC operator forgot to adjust the torpedo speed setting when switching between torpedo types, the gyro angles would be wrong because the machine calculated lead angles based on how fast the torpedo would travel to the intercept point. O'Kane experienced this problem during one of Tang's patrols when switching from Mark 14 steam torpedoes to Mark 18 electrics. The TDC operator failed to adjust the speed setting, and the first spread missed ahead because the torpedoes took longer to reach the intercept point than the TDC had calculated. O'Kane recognized the problem immediately, ordered the correction, and the next spread struck home. But the incident illustrated how the TDC's sophistication demanded equally sophisticated operation. Another challenge involved the quality of input data. The TDC could process information brilliantly, but it couldn't create accuracy from bad observations. A commander who consistently misjudged angle on the bow would feed bad data into the machine, producing bad firing solutions. The TDC would detect the error indirectly predicted bearings wouldn't match observed bearings, but it couldn't automatically correct for systemic observation errors. This placed a premium on training and experience. Submarine commands established schools where prospective commanding officers practiced periscope observations for hundreds of hours, learning to judge angle on the bow, estimate target speed from masthead angle and bearing rate, and call bearings with precision. Some officers never fully mastered these skills. The submarine force relieved numerous commanders during the first 2 years of the war for insufficient aggression or poor attack results. Some of these officers simply lacked the nerve for close-range combat. Others possessed courage but lacked the observational acuity the TDC required. They would estimate target speed at 12 knots when the actual speed was 8 knots, or misjudge angle on the bow by 20 degrees, and their torpedoes would miss despite having a functioning TDC and reliable torpedoes. The machine amplified skill but couldn't create it. The Japanese submarine force faced different constraints. Their submarines carried excellent torpedoes. The Type 95 with its oxygen-fueled engine could reach speeds of 49 knots at ranges exceeding 9,000 meters, far superior to the Mark 14's performance envelope. But Japanese submarine doctrine emphasized attacks against enemy warships rather than merchant shipping, a strategic choice that limited their impact on American logistics. More critically, Japanese submarines lacked fire control systems equivalent to the TDC. Japanese submarine commanders used angle solvers that could compute gyro angles rapidly when given target bearing, speed, and range. But these calculators provided snapshot solutions rather than continuous tracking. A Japanese commander needed to estimate target parameters, solve for the gyro angle, maneuver his submarine to a firing position, and shoot before the situation changed. The entire sequence needed to be compressed into a few minutes to avoid losing the firing solution. This pressure encouraged attacks at closer ranges, where estimation errors mattered less and torpedo run times were shorter. The tactical results reflected these different approaches. American submarines in the Pacific achieved their highest success rates at ranges between 1,000 and 3,000 yards, distances where the TDC could track targets accurately, and torpedo run times were long enough for precise interception, but short enough that targets couldn't maneuver dramatically between firing and impact. Japanese submarines, lacking continuous tracking capability, tended toward either very close-range attacks where fire control was simpler or longer-range shots where the superior range of their torpedoes provided some margin for error. One remarkable Japanese submarine success demonstrated both the potential and limitations of their approach. On September 15, 1942, submarine I-19 under Commander Takakazu Kinashi detected an American task force near Guadalcanal. From a range of about 3,000 meters, Kinashi fired a spread of 6 Type 95 torpedoes at the carrier Wasp. The spread was designed to bracket the target, compensating for estimation errors by launching torpedoes on slightly divergent courses. 3 torpedoes struck Wasp, starting fires that eventually caused the carrier to be abandoned. But 2 of the other torpedoes from the same spread continued running on their preset courses, and, by extraordinary chance, struck other ships in the task force, the battleship North Carolina and the destroyer O'Brien. It was one of the most successful submarine attacks of the war, crippling 3 ships with a single salvo. But it also illustrated the difference between fire control philosophies. The Japanese spread firing technique assumed significant uncertainty in target parameters and attempted to compensate through volume. American doctrine, with the TDC, emphasized accuracy over volume, developing precise firing solutions that allowed tighter spreads and more efficient use of limited torpedoes. The German submarine experience in the Atlantic revealed similar patterns. U-boat commanders achieved great success during the happy time periods when they could attack poorly defended convoys, often on the surface at night where visual observations were straightforward and close-range shooting was feasible. But as Allied anti-submarine warfare improved better radar, more escorts, aggressive hunter-killer groups, and eventually escort carriers providing air cover, German submarines found themselves forced into submerged attacks at longer ranges under more difficult conditions. Their fire control systems, based on angle solvers, without continuous tracking, struggled with these complex engagements. A U-boat commander attempting a submerged attack against a zigzagging convoy needed to solve the fire control problem quickly before losing periscope depth or being forced deep by escorts. The calculations could be done. German submarine officers were highly trained and their calculators were well designed, but the process lacked the TDC's ability to track through time and maintain solutions during prolonged approaches. By late 1943, German submarines in the Atlantic faced a strategic situation where their fire control limitations contributed to declining effectiveness. Allied convoys with strong escorts and air cover forced U-boats into hasty, long-range attacks with poor hit rates. The submarines that did close to effective firing range often paid for that success with their lives as escorts hunted them down. German submarine losses climbed, while sinkings of Allied shipping declined, a stark reversal from the campaign's early years. The American submarine campaign in the Pacific followed the opposite trajectory. Early war frustrations with defective torpedoes gave way to increasing effectiveness as torpedo problems were resolved and commanders gained experience. By 1944, American submarines dominated the Western Pacific, sinking Japanese merchant vessels faster than they could be replaced. The TDC didn't win this campaign alone. It was one element in a larger system that included improved torpedoes, better intelligence about Japanese shipping routes, aggressive commanders willing to take risks, and the strategic decision to prioritize attacks against merchant shipping rather than warships. But the TDC enabled the tactics that made the campaign so devastating. Consider the mathematics of submarine warfare from Japan's perspective. A typical war patrol by an American submarine in 1944 lasted roughly 60 days and covered thousands of miles. During that patrol, the submarine might encounter multiple convoys and independent merchant ships. With the TDC enabling accurate fire control, an aggressive commander could sink 4, 6, 8 ships in a single patrol. Tang's record third patrol sank 10 ships. Over the course of the war, the roughly 250 American fleet submarines that saw combat service sank approximately 1,300 Japanese merchant vessels and 200 Japanese warships. Japan began the war with approximately 6 million tons of merchant shipping, barely adequate for the empire's needs, even in peacetime. Replacing losses required shipyard capacity that was also needed for warship construction and repair. As American submarines cut into merchant tonnage month after month, Japan's ability to transport oil from the Dutch East Indies, rubber from Southeast Asia, food from Korea, and troops to garrison the far-flung Pacific islands deteriorated progressively. By late 1944, critical resources simply couldn't reach the home islands in sufficient quantities. Factories shut down for lack of raw materials. The Navy couldn't train pilots because aviation fuel was too precious to expend on training flights. This economic strangulation was as decisive as any battle. The TDC contributed to it by making American submarines more effective hunters. Each improvement in hit rate meant fewer torpedoes needed per sinking, which meant more ships could be attacked per patrol, which multiplied the pressure on Japanese logistics. The technology didn't create American victory strategy. Industrial capacity, intelligence, and human courage all played larger roles, but it sharpened the weapon that cut Japan's maritime lifelines. In the conning tower of Tang on the night of October 24, 1944, Richard O'Kane stood at the periscope, observing a Japanese convoy off the coast of Formosa. This was Tang's fifth patrol, and she had already sunk 11 ships over the previous weeks. Tonight's attack would be her last. The TDC tracked targets as O'Kane maneuvered Tang into position, firing torpedoes at multiple ships as the convoy scattered. The 24th torpedo Tang fired that night, her last weapon, experienced a steering malfunction and began running in a circle. It struck Tang amidships, sending her to the bottom within minutes. O'Kane and 8 other survivors were taken prisoner. The TDC went down with Tang, its brass gears and mechanical brilliance consigned to the deep. But the system had proved its worth through 5 combat patrols and 33 confirmed sinkings. Other TDC-equipped submarines continued the campaign. By war's end, the Torpedo Data Computer had become the standard against which all submarine fire control systems were measured, the first truly successful implementation of continuous target tracking in underwater warfare, and a glimpse of the automated fire control systems that would define naval combat in the decades to come. The interrogation room at Ofuna Detention Center outside Yokohama held a single wooden table and 2 chairs. Lieutenant Commander Fukumura Toshiaki, captured when his submarine I-27 was sunk by destroyer depth charges in February of 1944, sat across from an American naval intelligence officer in the weeks following Japan's surrender. The officer wanted to understand Japanese submarine fire control methods, and Fukumura, exhausted, malnourished, and facing an uncertain future, answered with the defeated man's brutal honesty. "Your submarines," he said through the interpreter, "could track multiple ships at once, yes? While maneuvering? While the targets changed course?" The intelligence officer nodded, curious where this was leading. Fukumura's expression suggested a man confronting something he had suspected, but never fully comprehended until the war's evidence made denial impossible. "We could not do this. Our calculator solved for one moment. If we maneuvered, the solution was lost. If the target zigzagged, we started again." He paused, choosing his next words carefully. "We believed our torpedoes were superior. The Type 95 had greater range, higher speed. But the torpedo is only half the problem, yes? You must know where to aim it." This conversation, documented in U.S. Navy intelligence reports declassified decades later, captured the essential irony of the Pacific Submarine War. Japan entered the conflict with arguably the finest submarine-launched torpedoes in the world, oxygen-fueled weapons that outperformed their American counterparts in nearly every measurable category. German U-boats carried effective torpedoes backed by a sophisticated tactical doctrine developed over years of unrestricted commerce raiding. Both navies possessed skilled commanders, modern submarines, and aggressive warrior cultures. But neither possessed the Torpedo Data Computer's ability to track targets through time. That single technological advantage, combined with strategic decisions about how to employ submarines, created a cascade of consequences that echoed through the entire Pacific campaign. The numbers told a story of diverging effectiveness. American submarines in the Pacific sank approximately 1,300 Japanese merchant vessels and warships, totaling over 5 million tons. Japanese submarines, operating in the same theater with similar numbers of boats at various points in the war, sank roughly 180 Allied vessels, a fraction of the American total. German U-boats in the Atlantic achieved impressive totals during certain periods, particularly the happy time of 1940 and early 1941, but their success rate collapsed as Allied anti-submarine warfare evolved. By 1944, U-boats were being sunk faster than they could destroy Allied shipping, a catastrophic reversal that effectively ended Germany's maritime campaign. These outcomes reflected doctrine, strategy, and industrial capacity as much as technology. The American decision to prioritize attacks on merchant shipping rather than warships proved strategically sound. Strangling Japan's economy mattered more than sinking individual cruisers or destroyers. German tactical doctrine adapted to technological constraints, emphasizing close-range surface attacks that minimized fire control complexity. Japanese submarine doctrine scattered boats across vast ocean areas hunting for warship targets, an approach that generated occasional spectacular successes but failed to create sustained pressure on Allied logistics. Yet beneath these strategic and doctrinal differences lay the fundamental problem of fire control, the practical challenge of hitting a moving target with a weapon that took 60 to 90 seconds to reach its intercept point. The TDC addressed this challenge more effectively than any competing system, and that effectiveness compounded over thousands of attacks across 4 years of war. Consider what the technology meant in human terms. A Japanese submarine commander stalking an American convoy faced the knowledge that his fire control solution was a snapshot, valid only for the moment of calculation. If he spent 15 minutes developing accurate estimates of target course and speed, those estimates would be obsolete the instant the target zigzagged or he maneuvered his submarine. This pressure encouraged quick attacks based on rapid estimates approaches that increased the likelihood of detection by escorts and reduced hit probability. The commander lived with the knowledge that his excellent torpedoes would only be as effective as his ability to aim them under time pressure. An American submarine commander with a functioning TDC faced a fundamentally different psychological reality. He could take his time, developing accurate firing solutions over 15 or 20 minutes, while the machine tracked targets continuously. He could maneuver freely, knowing the TDC would compensate. If an escort forced him to alter course, the firing solution remained valid, updated automatically as the submarine moved. This tactical flexibility encouraged the methodical approaches that produced higher hit rates and allowed more complex attacks against well-defended targets. The difference showed most clearly in multi-target engagements. When attacking a convoy, an American commander could designate multiple targets to different fire control parties, maintain solutions on all of them simultaneously, and fire in rapid sequence at ships on completely different bearings. Japanese and German commanders needed to solve one problem at a time, fire, then begin the process again for the next target. This sequential approach consumed precious time and allowed convoys to scatter after the first attack. Dudley Morton and Richard O'Kane exploited this advantage ruthlessly during Wahoo's aggressive patrols in 1943. In one engagement off New Guinea, Wahoo attacked a 4-ship convoy with destroyer escort, sinking 3 merchantmen and damaging the 4th in a running battle that lasted less than 30 minutes. Morton maneuvered Wahoo into the convoy formations center, using the TDC to maintain firing solutions on targets ahead and astern, while the submarine twisted through the formation at high speed. The escorts, focused on defending against external attack, struggled to locate the submarine that had penetrated their screen. By the time they organized an effective response, Wahoo had expended her torpedoes and was clearing the area at maximum speed. Such tactics would have been nearly impossible without continuous target tracking. The geometric complexity submarine moving at 17 knots, targets on varying courses, ranges changing every second overwhelmed manual calculation methods. The TDC made the calculations tractable, transforming what should have been chaotic improvisation into choreographed violence. The technology's post-war legacy extended far beyond submarine warfare. The TDC represented one of the earliest successful applications of analog computing to real-time fire control, a concept that would dominate military systems development for decades. Surface ships adopted similar principles in their gun fire control computers. Aircraft employed analog computing for navigation and bombing calculations, and eventually guided missiles relied on sophisticated computers to track and intercept aerial targets. But the TDC also revealed limitations that would drive the next generation of fire control development. The system was purely mechanical, using gears, differentials, and electrical motors to perform calculations. This made it robust and reliable in the harsh submarine environment, no vacuum tubes to fail, no complex electronics to be damaged by depth charge attacks. But mechanical computers had inherent speed limitations. The calculations took time, and the long accuracy depended on the precision with which gears could be manufactured and maintained. As torpedo speeds increased and engagement ranges grew in the post-war era, mechanical computing approached its practical limits. The transition to electronic fire control computers began in the late 1940s and accelerated through the 1950s. These new systems could perform calculations orders of magnitude faster than mechanical computers, could store complex algorithms in memory, and could integrate with radar and sonar systems in ways that mechanical computers couldn't match. By the time the first nuclear submarines entered service in the 1950s, they carried fire control systems that bore only philosophical resemblance to the TDC electronic computers that tracked multiple targets simultaneously, calculated intercept courses for faster torpedoes, and integrated with passive sonar arrays that could detect targets at ranges the TDC's designers never imagined. Yet, even these sophisticated successors owed their conceptual foundation to the TDC's pioneering implementation of continuous target tracking. The fundamental insight that a fire control system should track targets through time rather than provide snapshot solutions remained valid across the technological transition, from mechanical gears to electronic circuits to modern digital computers. Submarine fire control systems in service today, with their microprocessors and graphical displays, still perform the same basic function the TDC performed in 1943, predicting where a target will be and calculating how to send a weapon to intercept it. The human dimension persisted across this technological evolution. Modern submarine fire control systems, for all their sophistication, still require skilled operators who understand the principles of target motion analysis. Training programs still emphasize the importance of accurate observation and sound tactical judgment. The computer can calculate, but it cannot decide which target to engage, when to fire, when to break off, and seek new opportunities. Those decisions remain the commander's responsibility, just as they were Richard O'Kane's responsibility in Tang's conning tower. The broader strategic lessons from the Pacific submarine campaign influenced naval thinking for generations. The success of unrestricted submarine warfare against merchant shipping, enabled in part by superior fire control technology, validated the submarine's role as a commerce raider and demonstrated the vulnerability of maritime logistics to sustained attack. Every major navy developed submarine forces optimized for attacking merchant vessels as well as warships. The Soviet Navy, observing American success in the Pacific, built large submarine fleets specifically designed to interdict NATO supply lines across the Atlantic in the event of war with the West. This strategic emphasis on commerce warfare shaped Cold War naval planning and drove investments in anti-submarine warfare technology. If submarines equipped with effective fire control systems could strangle Japan's war economy, similar weapons might cut Western Europe off from American support in a future conflict. The response was massive investment in sonar systems, maritime patrol aircraft, escort vessels, and eventually, nuclear-powered attack submarines designed specifically to hunt other submarines. The technological competition between submarines and anti-submarine forces became one of the Cold War's defining features, consuming billions of dollars and producing innovations that rippled through civilian technology. None of this was inevitable. The TDC could have been designed differently, deployed later, or proven unreliable in service. American submarine doctrine might have emphasized warship attacks like Japanese doctrine, reducing the strategic impact of improved fire control. Torpedo defects might have persisted longer, negating the accuracy advantage the TDC provided. Alternative histories, where small changes produced dramatically different outcomes, are easy to imagine. But in the history that actually occurred, the Torpedo Data Computer provided American submarines with a fire control advantage that compounded over thousands of engagements to create strategic effects. Japanese shipping losses accelerated, critical resources failed to reach home islands, industrial production faltered. The TDC didn't cause these outcomes alone, but it sharpened the weapon that inflicted them. For the Japanese submarine officers captured at war's end, the realization arrived too late to matter. They had operated under doctrinal and technological constraints that limited their effectiveness, attacking targets their high command designated, while American submarines ranged freely across vital shipping lanes. They had carried excellent torpedoes aimed with inferior fire control systems, while their enemies carried adequate torpedoes, aimed with superior computers. The irony was complete. Technical excellence in one area proved insufficient when paired with technical inadequacy in another. Lieutenant Commander Fukumura survived the war and eventually returned to Japan, where he lived into his 70s. In occasional interviews with Japanese naval historians, he spoke about the shock of learning after the war just how effective American submarines had been. The propaganda during the war had emphasized Japanese successes, the sinking of carriers, Wasp and Yorktown, the torpedoing of cruiser Indianapolis, while minimizing or concealing the catastrophic losses of merchant tonnage. Only in defeat did the full picture emerge. Hundreds of ships sunk, millions of tons sent to the bottom, economic strangulation that contributed as much to Japan's collapse as strategic bombing or island invasions. "We did not understand," he said in one interview conducted in the 1970s, that the Americans had solved the problem of time. Their machine could see into the future not perfectly, but well enough. We could only see the present moment, and in submarine warfare, the present moment is already past. This observation captured the essential nature of the fire control problem and the TDC's solution. Submarine warfare existed in a space between observation and action, between the moment you saw a target and the moment your weapon could reach it. Manual methods attempted to bridge that gap through rapid calculation and tactical positioning, compressing time until observation and action nearly coincided. The TDC took a different approach. It extended observation into the future, using continuous tracking to build predictions that remained valid even as time passed and conditions changed. The distinction might seem subtle, a matter of computational technique rather than fundamental capability. But subtle technical advantages, applied systematically across thousands of engagements, create strategic realities. The TDC didn't make American submarines invincible. It didn't guarantee hits or eliminate risk. What it did was shift probabilities slightly but consistently in favor of the attacker. That shift, multiplied across the Pacific War's 4 years, helped strangle an empire. The machine itself was not elegant by modern standards. A large metal box filled with gears and motors, requiring constant maintenance, vulnerable to shock and salt corrosion, demanding skilled operators who understood its quirks and limitations. It represented the apex of mechanical analog computing applied to military problems, sophisticated enough to solve complex differential equations in real time, yet still fundamentally mechanical in an era when electronic computation was emerging. But it worked. In the hands of skilled commanders, under combat conditions, against determined enemies, the Torpedo Data Computer proved its worth through the most rigorous test imaginable. Survival in battle. The submarines that carried it sank more ships, achieved higher hit rates, and executed more complex attacks than submarines without equivalent systems. The technology didn't create courage or tactical brilliance, but it enabled both to achieve results that would have been impossible otherwise. By war's end, the TDC had become the standard against which all submarine fire control systems were measured. British submarines adopted similar continuous tracking systems. Soviet submarines reverse-engineered captured German technology and developed their own tracking computers. The post-war submarine forces of every major navy incorporated the principle the TDC had validated. Fire control systems should track targets continuously, not provide snapshot solutions. This legacy persisted into the age of guided torpedoes, nuclear submarines, and digital computers. The fundamental problem remained the same: predicting where a target would be and sending a weapon to intercept it, even as the technology evolved beyond anything the TDC's designers could have imagined. Modern fire control systems track dozens of targets simultaneously, calculate intercept solutions for weapons traveling at over 50 knots, integrate data from sensors that can detect contacts hundreds of miles away. But they still perform the basic function the TDC performed, bridging the gap between observation and action seeing into the future well enough to hit targets in the present. Thank you for watching. For more detailed historical breakdowns, check out the other videos on your screen now, and don't forget to subscribe.